I get this a lot. Like entrepreneurs feel like, they're lost, or they feel like they don't know what their vision is just yet. That's okay, right? Your mission doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like fully completed, like it's fully built. It just has to be meaningful. A man who seeks to correct himself will find something to correct. A man who doesn't seek to correct himself will never find anything wrong, right? So again, it's about understanding, like, what is it I want? What is it I care about? When you start to think about it more, you will find it. You will find it.
So you mentioned, like, for example, the Sahaba and all these great men, and there's going to be trials and tribulations. One of the biggest trials is when you actually have a villain. And you said before that every hero, he faces a villain.
Of course.
So who is his villain, and kind of how does he tie into the mission? I'm going to start this podcast with a promise. After this episode, you're going to have all of the tools you need to guarantee success for yourself, almost no matter where you're starting from. This is about more than just mindset. It's about becoming the hero of your own story, unlocking your potential, and building a life of peak performance. Whether you want to be the best in your field, the best father, the best version of yourself, this framework will transform how you approach life. And now let me warn you, every hero has a villain. And today we'll reveal who the villain in your story is and how to defeat them. So Fawaz, let's start with this, inshallah. Why is it important being on a mission? And why is this like so critical for success in the dunya and the akhirah?
Perfect, good question. I think first of all, you have to understand, right? Let me be clear. Without a mission, you're always going to be drifting. It becomes difficult to say yes and no. It becomes difficult to deal with the tough days, to deal with the struggles. A mission is everything, all right? Now, one thing I'm very big on, and I like to get people to actually understand, is it doesn't matter whether you're actually on this heroic mission or not, or whether you're actually on this crazy mission. You have to make it in your mind. Because if you do not create it in your mind, someone who's operating in that way where they're on a mission to achieve something, right? They're always going to go further than you, okay? And now as Muslims, we do have a mission, right? Our mission is to get closer to Allah, to attain Jannah. Now, everyone else's way and path to achieving Jannah is different, right? So other people have this aim, other people have aim. Like, for example, what's Fawaz's mission? Fawaz's mission is to help entrepreneurs live by design in a way where they can build their companies, fulfill their visions, fulfill their missions without lacking in the akhirah, without lacking as a family man, etc. So this is what you need to understand. A mission actually gives you what? Direction. All right. It gives your life direction. It helps your decisions. All right. And it aligns, every action you do is aligned with this overall mission. So every single person must have some sort of a mission, right? And when we look at this, is this far from the Quran and Sunnah? No, it's not. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he was on a mission. His mission was clear, right? We all know what the Prophet ﷺ's mission was, to make sure that what? La ilaha illallah is spread across the whole globe, right? To bring people back to what? Tawheed. The mission was, he was able to endure absolutely everything based off of the what? Off of the size of his mission. The humiliation of Taif, right? The rejection of Quraysh, the loss of Khadija radiallahu anha, Abu Talib, his uncle, right? Why was the Prophet ﷺ able to endure all of these things and keep going? Even though, imagine, I want to paint a picture here, right? You're sent by God. Everyone is calling you what? Crazy. Right? They're calling you a magician, as we know. Allah mentions in the Quran, right? Everyone's mentioning, this guy he's a magician, he's crazy, Sahirun al Majnoon, again and again. And if you look at it, that was not different to any of the prophets. All of the prophets had that situation. But what allowed them to endure and keep going? The size of the mission. And this is why every entrepreneur needs to understand the size of the mission. What is going to allow you to say yes? What's going to allow you to say no? What's going to make sure you do certain decisions is your mission. Now, what is that? You have to understand.
And this applies to us today. Yani if you don't have a mission and you're just reacting to life, instead of just living it with a deep purpose. But again, like practically, what does having a mission look like?
Perfect. That's actually a good question. I get this a lot. Being on a mission means you're living for something bigger than you. All right? If you look at it, like you're doing something that you don't just benefit by. Like an entrepreneur who's trying to save something or do something in the world is always going to like maybe achieve a certain objective, is always going to go longer and further and able to enjoy a lot more than an entrepreneur who's just doing this to reach financial freedom and take care of his family. Does that make sense? When your mission is big, the bigger your mission, the more you're going to endure. Like when you hear missions, like for example, we hear certain people like the Wahid Invest, right? You talk about what's their mission, to actually remove riba, right? You talk about people like, again, Ustad Naman's vision, right? I want to make righteous and rich Muslims. I want to make sure that practicing, etc. The bigger your mission, the more you're able to endure difficulties. Does that make sense? When you look at it, entrepreneurs, when you look at like practical examples like Elon Musk, you see that it's not just a money thing to them, all right? It's not just a finance thing. They actually have a mission, and the size of that mission is what allows them to what? Keep going, right? So what breaks your heart, and how do you actually understand what your mission is? I've kind of summarized it into like 3 fundamental questions, right? This is how I decide what is your mission. It's like, what breaks your heart? Your heart, right? Now, riba, I hate riba. But is it something that like breaks my heart? Yes, but the maximum degree, no. So that's not really a part of my vision, all right? Is making more Muslims more money, is that something that is amazing? Yeah, but does it break my heart the way that Muslims aren't financially weak? Kind of, but it's not the biggest thing. Right? The biggest problem I have is I understand that entrepreneurs these days, we should be able to live by design. It breaks my heart seeing entrepreneurs jump from being a husband to being a CEO to being suddenly an abd of Allah again, to being a talibul ilm again. It breaks my heart when I see them. So that's one thing. The next thing, what are my skills? Alhamdulillah, so it's about understanding what talents and abilities has Allah given me that I can use to serve other people, right? So I understand performance to a very high degree, right? I would make an argument that, the last 5 to 7 years, I've just solely studied the mind, performance, how life works, how to balance things, all of these things, right? So that's something that I've been given, an ability I've been given, again, that I can use to, again, aid this deen, right? And what legacy do I want to leave? So when you die, what do you want to be remembered for? You know what? If people can say, this guy actually helped people live by design. They were able to achieve everything they wanted to achieve. More income, be a good Muslim, be a good father, be the best of what they could be without it draining them or burnout, etc. They got ahead. Right? So when you have those 3 questions, it actually allows you to create a lot of clarity. And that clarity gives you strength to endure. Right? So for example, take Umar bin Khattab. His mission was clear. He wanted to establish justice and to expand the Islamic State. That was the mission of Umar bin Khattab. That mission fueled his legendary leadership. Right? Can you imagine, had they not had that North Star, had they not had a mission, how would they have been the men they were? It's the mission that kept them going. He didn't live for himself. He lived to fulfill a purpose. Right? Something that was bigger than himself. And when you look at it, every single great man, every man who is great, who wanted to do something great, he only achieved it because it was bigger than himself.
But see, when I'm talking to a lot of the entrepreneurs, because they've been fed this lie for years upon years, and from the books, even from the 80s, from the 90s, from ages ago, the vision and the mission becomes money and this financial freedom. Like, how does a person go back deeper into their thoughts again and realize what was their purpose in their life, their mission?
Yeah, I get this a lot. Like, entrepreneurs feel like, they're lost, or they feel like they don't know what their vision is just yet. That's okay, right? Your mission doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like fully completed, like it's fully built. It just has to be meaningful, right? So start small, reflect, like I mentioned, what moves you emotionally? What's something that genuinely makes you angry, sad, or inspired, right? What moves you emotionally? Look at your strengths, right? What are you naturally good at? And think about the impact you want to have on the world, right? What matters? What problems can you solve? And that's, again, you're going to slowly start to become more careful, more like understanding of what your mission is on this earth, right? I don't care if your company is a videography company, right? What is your mission? You can do certain things. You can spread the message of Allah. You can do da'wah through what? Videography. So it's about understanding what is that thing. And the reason the mission is so important, like I said, is because it's going to allow you to endure what you can't endure if you don't have a mission. It's going to fuel you on the days where motivation isn't there, nor is discipline.
You mentioned having a vision and a mission that is bigger than yourself. if the mission is so big that maybe you might not even see it in your lifetime, what's the point of even pursuing it in the first place?
You have to be fine with that. You have to be fine. Sometimes it's a chance, there's a high chance a lot of the times, if your vision is as big as it should be, that it may not even be fully achieved in your lifetime. Is that a problem? No. Why do I say that? Islam is now the fastest growing religion in the world. All right? Islam has over 2 billion Muslims across the globe. There's over 2 billion Muslims. A lot of the world was conquered by the Islamic State. Right? Did that happen before or after the death of the Prophet ﷺ? After. He served his mission. All right? The Prophet ﷺ did what he was supposed to do. And if your mission is big enough and good enough, and you actually build that foundation strong enough, even if it doesn't finish in your lifetime, people will follow you and finish it.
Okay, and let's go back kind of to the hero's journey that we were talking about in the beginning, right? You said before that every person is living their own version of this hero journey. So how does that kind of tie into the mission?
Perfect. The hero's journey is literally like, subhanAllah, it's a timeless framework, right? For transformation. Now, it's not saying this is exactly how it runs, right? But anyone who's familiar with the framework, it's actually how they've said the best movies are made, the best, the movies we love today are made using this sort of framework, if you will, right? And even if you look at the life of the Sahabas, the life of the prophets, the stories that we study, it's a similar framework, right? It's a similar thing we see again and again, right? So they get the call to adventure. All right. So it's like every hero begins in their comfort zone, but then they're pulled to something greater. Right. So we see at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right, he was called in the cave with the first revelation. Right. Then number two, essentially the trials and the tribulations come. Right. So that's when the hero starts to what? Get tested. Right? They get tested. Think of the Prophet ﷺ at Badr or Uhud or at the Hijrah, constantly being tested. Right? They're tested and they're tested. And then there's a transformation, which is through those trials, the hero becomes what? Stronger. He gains more clarity, right? And then there's the return. It's when finally the hero comes and completes their mission, right? And inspires other people. If you look at the story of Yusuf, again, it's quite similar, right? He was with his brothers. What happens? Trials and tribulations, right? And then from that, again, alhamdulillah, he changed, he transformed, he became what? The governor of Egypt. And then what? He returned. Does that make sense? So subhanAllah, if you look at it, a lot of the times, if you see yourself as on a mission and every trial and tribulation is a part of this what? The same way the prophets were tested. And this is beautiful because Allah, the reason Allah gave us these stories in the Quran is that we take what? Inspiration through them. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ الَّذِينَ قَبْلَهُمْ وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. And we tested those before you to see who are what? Who are truthful and those who are what? Liars. And that's why I say, whenever the trials and tribulations come, we see how serious you are about your mission. How much do you care about it? Right? And that again goes back to exactly what we're talking about. When you're on a mission, you're living your own heroic journey. The trials you face aren't obstacles, they're tests. Right? That shape you into the person that you need to become to serve this mission. Does that make sense?
No. But how do you endure all these trials? Because you mentioned there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations. It's just something you have to expect. Like, what keeps someone going when the journey gets difficult?
This is why, I like to bring up the stories of the Salaf and our Sahabas. If you look at Bilal ibn Rabah, radiallahu anh, have you heard the story of when he was being, tortured? SubhanAllah. And again, he's saying, ahadun ahad, ahadun ahad. SubhanAllah, my shaykh actually told me that, he wasn't saying ahadun ahad only. He was saying a lot of things in the beginning. But he realized that whenever he would say ahadun ahad, they would torture him more. It's the thing that annoyed them the most. So that's what he kept repeating. And when you look at that, like, what can allow a man to endure being tortured to that degree? It's because what? The size of the mission. He understood that this is bigger than him, right? This is bigger than him. This is something greater than him. Yet he never wavered. Because of what? Because of the mission, right? Worshipping Allah alone, right, was worth more than any sort of comfort to him. And that's the idea behind your mission. Your mission should be worth more than the idea of you just being comfortable or not living. It should be bigger than you. And someone, trust me, and again, I'm repeating, someone who operates with that form of thinking will always beat someone who doesn't. And that's why it's important for me, not only as do we tie our mission to something greater than us, but we tie it to what? To serving the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, because there's nothing better and greater than that. And that is a mission that will serve you in this earth and in the hereafter as well. And this is why I say without a mission, you're weak, right? With a mission, when you have a mission, you become unstoppable.
Because of how much distractions have been put around us, majority of people, they're not even the main characters in their own stories anymore. And it's like you speak to children, what they have to go through these, YouTube and watch these cartoons just to even get a general gist, rather than actually understanding that we actually have a framework, looking at the Sahaba, looking at the Prophet ﷺ, that you've actually been given a framework to be a hero in your own story.
So every man needs to be on a mission. Every man needs to be on a mission. But it's more important, like I mentioned, for these entrepreneurs to tie themselves to a mission, right? Otherwise, everything you achieve is going to be shallow, right? When you're on a mission, and I don't care, like people tell me, yeah, but in reality, are you going to be able to achieve that? Yeah, they said that. I'm sure they said that to the Sahabas at the time. They said that to the Prophet ﷺ, right? That, these things you want to achieve, it's not going to happen. Right? SubhanAllah, when the Prophet ﷺ, at the war, what were the munafiqeen saying? This is the what? This is the Jannah that he promised. This is the what? Yeah, they were laughing as the Prophet ﷺ was telling them they're going to conquer Rome, they're going to conquer X, Y, Z. Being ridiculed.
I just want people to actually understand how big of a thing conquering Rome actually was.
Of course.
From a man that was living in the desert, and you're talking about like...
It sounds like, stop waffling. Okay. Rome. And subhanAllah, you see how the munafiqeen were as well. As when it was happening, when they were in the ditch, the trenches, exactly. Barakallah fiqh. You see their language, how they were speaking. Why? And this is why when we see, and this is the reason for me why I believe in a man being good at everything. Why can't you be strong physically? Why can't you be what? Strong with education? Why can't you be strong financially? Why has society told you you have to choose one of these things and just delve into them? If you design your life, you can do all those things. Be on a mission, right? And that's my mission as well, to show that you can be close to Allah, you can scale your companies, you can do all these things. You just need to design the life to give those things, right?
And actually, I hear this a lot. I was speaking to a lot of men, what they were like, so this guy was talking about my mission and this and what, and actually it's actually causing them stress in the sense of like, why is he doing that? Rather than in a way expecting that this is a part of their journey, and every time you hear it, it actually fuels you even more. It's like you have that like slight smug, slight smile. It's like
you know why? Like it's actually beautiful. SubhanAllah, I'm gonna tell you this. See, when you actually like you believe like you're on a mission, like you are sent by Allah to do this thing. All right. Wallahi, every piece of difficulty you face, it's like a badge of honor. If you look at it like a general at war, what allows him to earn his badges, he had to do something very difficult or endure something very, very difficult, right? When you're on a mission, every piece of difficulty, it's like, yes, thank you. Another opportunity. It only makes the story greater. When we're watching these films of these fiction books, what do we know? When is it the most beautiful? When it's like everyone counts their mission out and he thrives and he succeeds.
He wins. It's at the top.
Exactly. All right? Does that make sense?
No.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Sorry to interrupt you. If you would like for us to teach you and help you design your life in a way where you can, get to the place you want to get to and understand how to deal with things like interference, entropy, all these things that creep in, all of those interferences that are, lagging and holding you down from achieving your full potential, then click the link in the description and book a free call with myself, a free consultation where we can talk about it, see how we could possibly improve your life. And if it makes sense, only if it makes sense, we will make you an offer, inshallah, to come join us with the Live by Design program, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, so you mentioned, like, for example, the Sahaba and all these great men, and, there's going to be trials and tribulations. But one of the biggest trials is when you actually have a villain. And you said before that every hero, he faces a villain.
Of course.
So who is this villain, and how does he tie into the mission?
Your villain is the perfected version of yourself. right? It's the version of you who wakes up on time, who controls his emotions, who works out daily, who never wastes his time. He does every single thing that he knows he should be doing, that you know you should be doing, that you don't do. He's a great father. He's a great husband. He's a great what? Child, son. He's a great what? Slave of Allah. He's great in every single way, shape, and form. Right? He's more structured and he's created a life by design. And because he's designed his life perfectly, he wins and he's always going to beat you. You know why? A bad system will always beat a good person. A system that is bad, yes, I know, you're probably thinking, is it not meant to be like a good system will be no. A bad system will always beat a good person. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how good your mission is. If you don't build the systems to be able to succeed, you're never going to get there. And when we look at the Prophet ﷺ, he built it. And that's why the Sahabas were able to what? To conquer. Why were they able to conquer? And again, it just brings me back to the saying of a statement of Umar ibn Khattab. He says, we were people who are what? A shameful people. We are disgraced people who received honor. And we were honored through what? Islam. And if we ever seek honor through anything else, we will return back to what? Back to disgrace, back to dishonor. So it's about understanding the reason the Sahabas were able to do what they went ahead and done is because they had the framework, they had the systems. The Prophet ﷺ embedded the systems for them, the design, how to do it, what to do, how to lead, what to do. You know what I'm saying? And this is why it's important that strategy is the most important thing. Having a mission is not good enough. How do you strategize, right? Because if you're dealing with things like burnout, if you're sleeping ineffectively, all of these things, how are you going to get to your mission? How are you going to achieve it? For you to achieve your mission, you need to be sharp. You need to be alert. You need to be there. You need to understand what you're trying to achieve. Does that make sense?
Look, you mentioned that a bad system will always overpower a good man. But what does that system look like? What does that mean?
Again, everyone's system is unique.
What's a bad system?
A bad system. A bad system, it's easy to define. It's a lack of systems in general. Right? So when you look at a lot of people, like they're not systematic at all. They just react. This happened, so this is how my week is gonna go. Or, there was an issue in this business, so I'm gonna go fix that. It's very, very reactional. Something pops up, they go address it. That, there's no like structure. There's no plan, right? And subhanAllah, like one of the most beautiful things like I've understood is if you want to understand a man, you know what the best thing to judge a man by is his calendar. Wallahi, it's his calendar. How does he spend his time? All right? Where does he spend his time? What's the, reoccurring themes? For a lot of people, it's just put out whatever fire. We wake up on Monday, we see what Monday has to offer. You can't get ahead that way. You have to be structured. You have to be really well thought out and planned. And this is where, like I said, you need to see yourself as on a mission. So the best way to achieve something is to sit back and design it. All right? To structure it and to continue to do it in a way until you get to your desired destination. Does that make sense? You see, one day you're going to stand before Allah, and that's the truth. And He will say, what? One day you're going to stand in front of Allah, right? And you're going to be judged for every single action that you did, everything you put forth. So what is there for us to judge by, And you're going to see, you're going to think, oh my God, I could have done X, Y, Z. I could have done this thing. I could have done that thing. I could have became this person. I should have became this person. These are the things that I should have done in my life, right? And I could have done. And Allah gave you the means to do it, but He didn't. And that's such an important thing people need to understand. Like, always seek to understand in every moment, what's the better version of me doing? And sometimes, wallahi, that does mean even resting, right? That does mean taking some time off. That does mean structured. Like, if time off is planned, then it's not inefficient, if that makes sense. If you're resting when you're supposed to rest, that's good for your mission. Does that make sense?
I just remembered a narration of a Roman emperor that went to Umar ibn Khattab, and he was sleeping under the tree, and they said, don't wake him up because he sleeps a little. And Umar ibn Khattab is probably, if there's anyone here after the Prophet ﷺ, is someone that had a massive, massive, massive mission. But yet they said that he didn't sleep a lot. So does this not kind of like contradict what you're talking about? Like where you're going to have to sacrifice your sleep, you're going to have to sacrifice peak performance and designing your life in order to achieve this big mission you're talking about?
Look, regardless of whatever way you look at it, sleep is important. All right? Sleep is very, very important. And, you know, the Umar bin Khattab not sleeping a lot, where perhaps people might say, okay, for example, Prophet, he doesn't sleep a lot. There's naturally certain people who can do with less sleep. All right? That's number one.
Says that's me.
Okay, no problem. Again, how do you know how much sleep you actually need? A good and simple way to do it is just don't set an alarm. When your body naturally wakes up, you're going to see, like, for example, if I go to bed at 10, my body normally wakes up around 4:30, I've noticed, consistently, all right? Which made it clear to me, like, I only need about 6.5 hours, right? I was kind of aware that I didn't need the 7, 8, 9, right? But again, you have to understand your sleep, right? You have to understand your lifestyle. You have to understand the way of things, right? Now, again, is there certain Salaf that, again, used to sleep quite well? Yes. Did the Prophet ﷺ advise it? Yes. Did the Prophet ﷺ sleep 8 hours himself? Yes. Does that make sense? So it's about understanding yourself and creating the systems in your life in a way where, again, Umar bin Khattab, what he was doing during those times as well has to be accounted for, right? And I bring these entrepreneurs that tell me I can't sleep 8 hours, etc., because I can't afford to. Bring me their schedules. I guarantee you I'll bring them 8 hours of sleep, right? They live very different lives.
But when you're talking about having a mission this big, and then let's say they start to act upon that, then you're saying, is that the point where they can sacrifice these things?
Is it necessary to sacrifice those things? During certain periods, yes.
Okay.
Right? During certain periods, you're going to have to do with less sleep. And that's why one of the things that we really believe in is training you to get around on days where it's not going to be 100%, right? All because we design our lives in a way doesn't mean we can always accept those design. Accept, like, you know, life always goes by design. Certain times things are going to happen, all right? So there's two elements to what we do. We show you the ideal situation and we're aiming for ideal, but we'll show you how to survive and how to deal with when the situation isn't ideal, all right? Which is super important as well, because, you know, it's easy to say, you know, prevent as much entropy as possible, but entropy comes in. It's easy to say limit as much stress in your life as possible, but stress comes in. It's about having a way, number one, preventing it where possible, and then number two, seeking to learn how to deal with it when it comes.
Okay, so that's actually a different structure of design we're even talking about altogether here.
Of course, anyone who tells you, Yani, no, just, you know, always, no, it's about, there's two key parts to it. You see, entrepreneurs don't genuinely understand how to deal with difficulty in terms of, like, you know, when issues come, how to adjust to those issues. You have to be fluid in a certain type of way, of course.
And I'm assuming this is actually part of that villain.
And it is a system as well within itself, by the way.
Yeah. And I'm assuming this is kind of like that villain as well that we're talking about, where he actually has the ability for any kind of pressure, any kind of circumstance. He's already designed his life in a way where he knows how to either prevent it from coming in, and when it comes in.
Yeah, I think one thing people misunderstand is, like, I fully understand it. You can't remove stress. You can't remove difficult days in business. Some days you do have to hustle it out. It's not a lifestyle, it's a periodic thing. Meaning it might be a week or two, right?
Okay.
In where there is a certain more amount of work demanded, right? There's certain things that are demanded during this period. And again, I do believe, of course, you have to be able to survive. But day to day, let's not act like entrepreneurs have that. And a lot of these hustle things they're doing to hustle it out, why are they hustling it out every single day? That shows that there's an issue with their systems and their company. All right? Yeah. If you can learn to deal with and adjust when those situations come, but generally live by design, it's always going to be far better.
Okay. I think that's perfect. Because I wanted to mention that, because when you have this big mission, again, you know that definitely there are going to be a lot of things that are required from you, but still you have to optimize living your life by design. So now let's kind of bring everything together. We talked about having a massive vision. We talked about visualizing what your villain looks like. Actually, before I even get to that point, why do we need to even know what that villain looks like?
You need to know what you're competing against, all right? And I think when you look at it, like I always say, what is the definition of performance, right? If there's an equation for performance, it's literally potential minus interference. Your villain has just removed every source of interference, so he's just strictly potential, right? And one of the things, the biggest motivators for me to remove every area of anything that can interfere me achieving what I need to achieve is exactly that. Because I know the level of potential, alhamdulillah, we have is so great. We just need to remove the interferences, the things that can come in between us and success. If we can learn to remove them. Entrepreneurs have to build mental toughness, right? Entrepreneurs have to learn to, work against, like, even how to deal with things like when they're, overworking themselves, how to replenish so extreme burnout. You have to learn and understand these things. Does that make sense?
So like I mentioned, we have now defined that we need to have this amazing, massive vision. We have to know exactly what that vision, that villain looks like. What are the different sectors that make this the peak potential that you have, and removing all interferences. And that's what you're kind of consistently competing against. You have to eliminate your weak habits. You have to eliminate your interferences. So how does that all look like step by step? How does a person, if he wants to start today, is like, oh, my vision has only just been money realistically and getting married, and I kind of already accomplished that. So how does a person start from today?
So obviously define your mission, all right? We talked about that start podcast. Write down what drives you. Write down the things that matter to you, the things that, like, emotionally, the things you care about, what you feel your purpose is as well, right? And visualize your villain as well, right? So understand, like, that version of you. And this is something I encourage all entrepreneurs to do. And I subhanAllah, like, it's something I like to do every morning as well, right? I just think of that version of me that's switched on, 100% effectiveness, 100%, just gets what he needs to get done. How is he going to perform today versus how am I going to perform, right? So it's almost setting the standard for what? For that version of me, the version that I want to become. And like I said, and I really want to emphasize for this, I am all for living for design. But sometimes life happens. You have to learn both, right? Both ends of the spectrum are just as important in terms of building, and that is a system within itself, and that is design. Deciding how your life is when things kick in, when different circumstances kick in. How do you deal with them, right? And again, eliminate your weak habits, right? That those interferences, those things that you're doing are the things that is gonna put, like, limit you from being what you could be. You really need to understand what your interferences are. If you want to maximize potential, you need to understand, what are my interferences? What's coming in between me and success?
I think there's another component here that is a prerequisite for all of these different things. And that's, we actually did a podcast on it. It's awareness. Because if you're not aware of what your potential looks like, if you're not aware of, because you talked about, okay, how do I have to have a vision or a mission, but in order for me to get that, I have to know what actually triggers me. I have to know what these things are. But most people have never even used their minds to go that far. So if you can give a little bit of a summary on how a person can actually become aware, first of all, of their weaknesses, their bad habits, and their kind of what they should base their mission around, and inshallah we can end it off with that.
For awareness, it's super, super important. You need to spend some time with yourself, in seclusion with yourself, and that really, really helps you in terms of awareness. All right, genuinely going and spending time with yourself and assessing your actions and just choosing to be more aware. It's actually a choice, right? I always give the perfect example, right? There was a time I was going to buy a car. I later decided not to buy it just because my life doesn't work well with owning a car, because I move around every 2-3 days, basically, countries. But at the time, the car is the only thing I could see. That specific car I wanted, in that specific color. I thought there was 1 million of it on the road. Did it increase? No. I'm sure there was the same amount of those cars on the road before I wanted it as after I wanted it. The difference is I was aware to it. I was thinking about it, so it's what I could see. When you seek to understand and become aware, what are my interferences, you start to see them. If you're not aware, you don't see them, all right? And you're looking for them and thinking about them, you start to see them a lot more, all right? The same thing is in yourself. A man who seeks to correct himself will find something to correct. A man who doesn't seek to correct himself will never find anything wrong. right? So again, it's about understanding like, what is it I want? What is it I care about? When you start to think about it more, you will find it. You will find it.
If this episode hit home, inshallah ta'ala, you should be able to identify that villain that you had within yourself the whole time. Don't just listen to this, actually apply it, define your mission, choose your villain. And if you're serious about unlocking your potential, then join us in the Live by Design program and let's build your heroic journey together.